The idea that only tech tycoons, crypto traders, or Wall Street bankers get rich overnight is a modern myth. Because long before Silicon Valley IPOs and meme stocks, there was a moment in history when the most unlikely people, simple rural farmers, men who spent their lives plowing fields, tending livestock, and living far from the centers of power, suddenly found themselves sitting on fortunes so enormous, so surreal, so impossible that Europe could barely comprehend it, an era when wealth erupted not in palaces or counting houses but in barns and pastures. Because in the early 18th century, France unleashed a financial experiment so explosive it made peasants millionaires on paper, servants into speculators, and entire villages into frenzied marketplaces. As the Mississippi bubble transformed the lives of ordinary people who had never seen a banknote, whose only prior experience with money was selling grain at market. Yet suddenly, they were holding shares worth more than aristocratic estates, watching their net worth double in a week, then in a day, then in an hour, as John Law, the gambler, mathematician, fugitive, and financial prophet who convinced an entire kingdom that paper money could rebuild a bankrupt nation, flooded France with a dazzling illusion of prosperity, minting fortunes out of thin air, telling people that the riches of Louisiana, that vast mysterious territory across the ocean, were so limitless that every share in the Mississippi Company was a ticket to unimaginable wealth. And as word spread from Paris salons to farmhouses in Burgundy and Brittany, peasants abandoned their fields and walked for days to reach the capital, crowding into narrow streets so packed with people you could barely breathe, everyone desperate to buy even a single share. Because if a farmer could turn one livestock sale into 50 shares, and those 50 shares doubled and doubled again, then a lifetime of poverty could be erased in a week. And as the stock price soared from 500 livres to 1,000, then 5,000, then a delirious 10,000, the entire country went mad with speculation, with carts full of grain sold to raise money for shares, with farmers leveraging future harvests, with rural families trading livestock for certificates they barely understood. And as their wealth grew, they began doing things no one expected. They bought fine clothes, new homes, Paris apartments, horses, jewelry, even titles of nobility, because for the first time in European history, class itself seemed negotiable, purchasable, as if the entire social order could be rewritten by a rising stock price. And the rich watched in horror as peasants swaggered into cafes wearing silks, while nobles found themselves outbid at auctions by men with mud still on their boots. And the mania spread so fast that even the king's ministers whispered that France had discovered a new kind of prosperity, a prosperity that did not require land or labor or gold, but simply belief. Yet beneath the glittering surface of this miracle lay the same lethal mechanism that would one day detonate the dot-com bubble and the crypto boom. Wealth built on confidence alone, on valuations severed from reality, on a financial system expanding faster than the world it claimed to represent, and the entire machine depended on one fragile illusion: that Louisiana was a golden world overflowing with minerals, furs, tobacco, and treasure, a paradise capable of generating infinite profits, even though almost no one had actually seen it. Even though the few who had returned spoke quietly of swamps, disease, and mismanagement, truths drowned out by the tidal wave of speculation cascading through every village and town, until finally the pressure became unbearable, because as more farmers became millionaires on paper, they wanted to convert that paper into something real. And the moment investors tried to exchange their shares for gold or land or guaranteed returns, cracks appeared in John Law's system, revealing that the entire structure was held together by promises, illusions, and the frenzied hope that the music would never stop, a hope that shattered the instant confidence faltered and people rushed to sell. And once the first farmer managed to cash out, everyone else decided it was now or never, turning the narrow streets of Paris into a stampede of terrified sellers, with peasants, merchants, aristocrats, and soldiers all clawing their way toward the same exchange windows, demanding gold that no longer existed, because Law, like the architects of every financial bubble that came after him, had issued far more paper claims than real wealth, hoping the public would never ask for redemption en masse. But panic is the great solvent of illusions, and as word spread that the bank had begun restricting withdrawals, fear ignited into hysteria, collapsing the share price with the same breathtaking speed it had risen, wiping out not only fortunes but entire identities, as farmers who had strutted through Paris as millionaires were reduced to beggars within days, begging creditors for mercy, selling livestock they no longer owned, returning home in disgrace to villages that now viewed them not as lucky miracle men, but as reckless gamblers who had risked entire communities' savings on a dream. And the more the bubble imploded, the more violent the reversal became. Because when a society suddenly elevates ordinary people to unimaginable wealth, it does not merely redistribute money. It rewires expectations, reshapes identities, destroys the emotional scaffolding that once held social order together. And when that wealth evaporates, what dies is not just prosperity, but the belief that life has a stable, predictable shape. And so the collapse triggered riots, bankruptcies, food shortages, and political backlash that forced John Law, once hailed as the savior of France, to flee Paris in disguise, hunted by mobs. His great financial experiment now seen as a national humiliation that revealed just how vulnerable a society becomes when it lets dreams of effortless wealth outrun reality. A humiliation so deep that France swore off modern finance for nearly a century, ensuring it would enter the late 1700s with a rigid, outdated economic system that contributed to the French Revolution, meaning the Mississippi bubble did not simply enrich and then destroy a generation of farmers, but altered the course of European history, showing that bubbles do not happen on trading floors, but in human hearts, driven by the same primal forces that powered the dot-com boom. The 2008 housing frenzy, the crypto spikes and crashes, the meme stock surges, because technology changes, but psychology does not. And the lesson this forgotten episode offers is as brutal as it is universal. That the moment ordinary people begin to believe they've discovered a shortcut to wealth, that they are smarter, luckier, or more deserving than the generations before them, that the future will obey their wishes because the present seems to, the countdown to collapse begins. And no amount of innovation or regulation or optimism can save a system built on runaway expectations, a system that grows unhinged from reality, because all bubbles feel like justice while they inflate. Finally, the little guy wins. Finally, the overlooked rise. Finally, the world becomes fair. But when they burst, the crash is not merely economic but emotional, cultural, spiritual, leaving behind not just losses but disillusionment, bitterness, and the silent, enduring question that haunts every financial mania from the 1720s to the present. How many times must the world learn that wealth created too quickly, spread too widely, and believed too deeply is never real, never stable, never safe, and always, inevitably, waiting to disappear?